Hello, and welcome, friends, to this 19th year of the Turner Winter Series. I am Kristen McMahon, president of the Robert H. Jackson Center, and for the second time this season, I have the pleasure of welcoming those in the Kappa Theater, as well as those joining this special interview virtually, which this time includes me as well. Before I turn the conversation over to Greg Peterson, the perennial host of the Turner Winter Series, let me start with a brief introduction of our guest, Maureen Rovegno, who typically welcomes you to these conversations and who is having her time in the guest chair, finally. Maureen O'Connor Rovegno is the recently retired director for the Department of Religion at the Chautauqua Institution. She came well prepared to work with the Department of Religion, having served previously as a Chautauqua Institution trustee from 1996 to 2004, as chair of the Annual Fund from 96 to 2002, and as chair of the Religion Advisory Committee from 2000 to 2005, as well as in numerous other capacities for the Department of Religion and the institution. Maureen is an interfaith, interdenominational chaplain, having served in hospice, hospital, and prison settings. She was trained in clinical pastoral ministry after receiving a Master of Divinity degree from Harvard Divinity School, with a concentration in comparative religious ethics and a ministerial focus in restorative justice, working extensively with healing circles. While at Harvard Divinity School, Maureen also studied Arabic in order to better understand Islam, one of the Abrahamic religions to which Chautauqua dedicated a 17-year study at her suggestion, for the purpose of teaching the historical and contemporary theological meanings inherent in the belief that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam share a common ancestor in the patriarch Avraham, Abraham, Ibrahim, as well as a common future. She earned her Bachelor of Arts from the Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. In addition to teaching world religions for many years, Maureen has been a dedicated advocate of peace. She worked with Ambassador Swanee Hunt's Women Waging Peace program at Harvard, and then with the Global Peace Initiative for Women, with the Reverend Dr. Joan Brown Campbell, to empower women worldwide to raise their voices for peace. She took part in the crafting of Karen Armstrong's Charter for Compassion as part of Chautauqua Institution's always broadening interfaith outreach. For this purpose, she also created and directed the Chautauqua Abrahamic Program for Young Adults, a signature Chautauqua program to involve young adults ages 16 to 22 in conversations and experiences that foster understanding and connection among practitioners of the Abrahamic religions, as well as all seekers of knowledge. Most of all, and she wanted to make sure I include this part, Maureen has loved working with Greg during these 19 seasons of the Turner Winter Series. It is my pleasure to welcome Maureen Rovegno and to turn the conversation over to Greg Peterson.
19 years, we finally got you to sit there. For those that are watching and listening behind us, they have no idea the effort that's been made to try to convince you to do this.
And I can't believe you did.
And I was wondering how I could possibly start this interview, and you just gave me the lead when we were off camera.
Oh dear.
And here's how. We were talking about the fact that the person who introduced you virtually, Kristen McMahon, was on her way next week to Egypt, the Middle East. And you allowed us how that you had not been to Egypt, but had been to Petra. And I just happened to uncover a manuscript, unpublished by the way, and unfinished, called "The Funny Thing Happened on the Way from Petra" by Maureen Rovegno. So could you tell me what the substance of that manuscript is, so before they read that?
Well, before I write it, actually, since this is the first I've heard of it.
Yeah.
But I did get to Petra.
Yeah.
And this was in 2004, and it was part of a conference being held by the Global Peace Initiative for Women in Jordan on the Dead Sea, to bring Israeli and Palestinian women together. We're always working with women. And these were women who had lost family members and were helping each other. timely to think about that right now. So well, of course I was going to go. This is 2004, and I have quite a story connected with it too. But Petra was a fun part because I got there a day early because Royal Jordanian Airlines only go one way one day and then the other way the next. So one day go to Jordan and the next day come back to the States. So I got there a day early, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought, well, I'll get a cab or something when I get to the airport. Was I ever thrilled when I arrived and there was this gentleman standing there with a big placard saying, Maureen, Rovegno. Now, this is also faith. I'm in a foreign country and I just see a man with my name and he says, come with me, and I went with him. It gets better because he said to me, what would you like to, when is the conference starting? I said, in 2 days, and he said, what would you like to do tomorrow? I said, well, of course I'd like to go to Petra. I had no idea it was 3 hours away because this was on the north end of the Dead Sea, and Petra is very much at the south end, well, past. But he said, I'll take you. I said, great. So we arranged he would take me the next day, and I left a message at the desk, and there were the members of the GPIW, Global Peace Initiative for Women, there. And we connected and all that sort of thing, but as I was going off with this unknown gentleman halfway around the world, I left a note at the desk and said, it was the gentleman you sent, and this is his name, and this is whom I'm with today, and I'll see you later. And off we go. Well, it was interesting because it took a long time to get there. When they say they're going to take you somewhere, there are stops along the way for commercial purposes. But that was all interesting too. Standing where Moses had stood on Mount Nebo, looking over the Jordan to see the Promised Land and never enter it, and there I was. I just surprised that these opportunities just sort of emerge. Anyway, we finally got to Petra. But by that time, now this is December. Did I mention this is December? And by the time we got to Petra, it was late in the afternoon, even though we left in the morning. It was a long, winding, circuitous way down that route. But it was fun because I had studied Arabic for 2 years and hadn't had a real chance to use it. And it was fun talking with this gentleman in Arabic, in and out of English, of course. And get to Petra, and I'll try to make this story shorter, as Jim has advised me on the way over in the car. Make your stories shorter, because I tend to include details. But it was fun, because as he left me, he took me over to this group of men that were sitting there. Has anyone here ever been to Petra? Okay, then you can picture what I'm talking about. There's men sitting there, and he says to them in Arabic, and I can understand this, be good to her, she speaks the language. Well, that's a little bit of an overstatement, but I appreciated that. And so I said I wanted to hire, given the shortness of when the sun was going to go down, in December we're almost to the longest night of the year, shortest day, and the sun was going to go down, and I'm thinking, I'm just getting to Petra, and the sun is going down, and so I hired a chariot. They look like chariots. And these giant horses pulled this chariot over huge boulders, and they're well accustomed to it. But anyway, we take it and you get to the Sikh, I think. It's that narrow entrance into that whole area where you have to get off the chariot. You have to walk in. My guide, they give me a guide, and we walk in, and I'll just make a long story short. It was interesting to be in Petra. I got to see the treasury. I got to see everything that was important. But it was a little eerie to be on the other side of the world in this situation with this other man that I've never met before in my life, and we're going in and out of these tomb caves. Okay, so it gets to be the time we have to leave, and we go through the Sikh again. We get on a chariot. The same chariot is waiting there. And as we start going over the boulders, which as I was on it, I was trying to stand up because my husband would call the whole vehicle a kidney killer, because your teeth are rattling. But this is the funny part. As this chariot was bumping along, I hear my name called, Maureen. And I went, stop. I told them, stop, stop. And I look around, I thought, who in Petra, as the sun is going down, is calling Maureen? You know who it was? Jadwi Banga and Jane Sterneman. And I think everybody here knows them. They were there. They saw me flying by, and I just said, do you want to ride? They said, oh, no, absolutely not. But what are you doing here? I mean, you don't expect somebody to call your name. Okay, fast forward, the conference was really quite significant and heartrending and all kinds of good things, but it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. The hospitality was wonderful. The women were wonderful. Everything was so wonderful. Ori Soltis was there too. And come Saturday, we were all going to have to leave, and Ori and I were going to share a car to get to the airport, Amman. In Amman.
So I'm trying to keep this straight. Another man and another vehicle.
Yeah, but I knew this one. I knew him very well. He was one of my favorite speakers that I ever would bring.
Trying to keep track. Right?
Yeah, okay, this is good, but since you even bring this up, I can't believe this. This was a significant event in my life because when we got to the airport, there was a person sitting on the side, you know, someone who had sign language cards for Arabic. And Ori and I both gave him our dinar, whatever we had left. What were we going to do with it? We gave it to this person sitting there. We got the cards, and we went in, and we went to the Royal Jordanian Airline. That's all there was. Counter, and the women behind the counter, very lovely. I gave them my passport. They put it in the computer, and gave me my boarding pass, which, because I'd had such a lovely, lovely, lovely experience that whole week there with the conference. And I had my passport pouch here under my blazer, but I was so comfortable, I put my passport and my boarding pass in my pocket, my blazer pocket. And when we went then immediately to try and go through customs, we realized there was an exit tax. And we had both given away our dinars, so we had to go to the exchange and get the money for the exit tax. And as we went through and paid the exit tax and going toward customs, I put my hand in my pocket and it was empty. And my heart just sank. I just thought, oh my goodness. I mean, once again, I'm thinking I'm halfway around the world and now I don't have a passport. And I said to Ori, I have a problem. My pocket is empty. My passport had been there. It's not there now. And he said, what are we going to do? I said, we're not going to do anything. Problem is mine. You go, get on the plane, and I'll see what I can do. What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to talk to that officer that's standing over there. So I go over to this officer, who was Officer Muhammad, and I said, Saidni, help me. What's the matter? My passport has been lifted, I said. And he said, La, no. It's in your carry-on luggage. I always carry on luggage. And I said, no, La, it was there. It's not there anymore. And I need help. I need help. So, yeah.
Good. Tell the story.
Okay, I'll continue telling the story. So he said, what can I do? What can I do? Very officious gentleman. And so he, said to me, and I said, well, we could go to the ticket agents, and she'll tell you. I had my passport a few minutes ago. She put the number in the computer. Well, we go over, and he starts talking to the ladies, and they said, and I'm hearing this conversation, and I understand what they're saying, and they're saying, what can we do to help her? And in the meantime, a gentleman in a suit had come over, and what can we do to help her? We can't let her on the plane because when she gets to her country, they're not going to let her in. So he just looked at me and he said, come with me. So we went over to his desk, and he starts writing directions for me to go to the embassy in Amman. the U.S. Embassy in Amman, directions I should give to the taxi driver to get me to the embassy. And when he handed me that paper, my heart just absolutely sank, because I thought to myself, this is December 18th, 1 week before Christmas. I am not getting home. I'm in a foreign country. I have no passport. And what in the world can I do? So I turned to Officer Muhammad and I said to him, Fiel Kika. Fiel Kika means surely, indeed, truly. Fiel Kika. Fiel Kika, surely something can be done. And he looked at me like the ugly American that I was, who was asking for the impossible. And he just said, with every ounce of his being, he said to me, Fiel Kika, only God can help you. And when he said that, out of my toes came out of my mouth, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, which means in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. In that moment, I was throwing myself on the mercy of God. And it wasn't a forethought, it was just something I had heard many, many times. It's the way every good Muslim begins anything, whether it's a meal or a conversation or getting up in the morning or going to bed at night. And it's the first opening, it's the first statement, prayer of the Quran. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And all of a sudden, when I said that, he just kind of stood back and he looked at me like I was a different person all of a sudden. And he just turned and he said, Ajlas, go sit down. And so in a moment, like the whole world changed again. It changed when I put my hand in my pocket, and it changed again when he just said to me, go sit down, because I said, oh my goodness, he's going to help me. I don't know what he can do, but he's going to help me. And so I went and sat down, and I don't know how I actually did, because I was kind of levitating. And anyway, time went by, and he comes back with the man in the suit and the ticket lady behind the counter, and he comes and he says, Auntie Maureen, are you Maureen? Nam, Anna Maureen. And he said, Ajlas, go sit down. So I did, and next thing I know, he comes back in this very officious officer, has this kind of pleased as punch look on his face, and as he's approaching me, he goes like this. And I had seen it on the card that this means okay, even in Arabic or any, I guess it's universal. And I went running and I said, what does this mean? What does this mean? And he says, it's still pleased as punch way, he says, we found your passport. Oh. And I said, you found my passport? And of course, why did I have to ask? I don't know, but I said, where? How? And he says, and he changes then. His affect gets very serious, and he says, a man has a large family and he doesn't know he has your passport. And that told me a couple things. And then he tells me, and he's on your plane. He did tell me that. And I thought, okay, they know who he is. He's on my plane. They're not doing anything about it. And guess what? I don't care. I want to get on that plane. I don't care. I do not care. And I look over, and the woman says to me, Harry, and I see she's got my passport. It's got my face on the passport. And I went, oh my God, I can't believe this. She says, Harry, we're holding the plane for you. Oh. Harry, we're holding it. So I went running, and then as in an Arabic country, you have to be patted. If you're a woman, everybody has to be patted down physically, but if you're a woman, you go into a booth and a woman pats you down. So I go into the booth, they pat me down, I start running up the gangway to the plane, and all of a sudden I hear a voice behind me say, slow down, and I said, no, they're holding the plane for me, and he said, I know, and I turned around, very officious looking gentleman, I'll never forget, long camel coat, chocolate turtleneck, very distinguished looking. And I thought to myself, security, you're going to be the last one on the plane. But as I got on the plane, Ted and Deb first, whom you know, were in first class because Deb had hurt her back, and they had bumped up from coach to first class. And they said to me, Ori said, your passport was stolen. What are you doing here? How are you here? What are you doing here? And I said, no, we'll talk later. I have to go sit down because they held the plane for me. So I tried to sit down and sort of levitating again. But when seatbelt, we were up in the air and we were off and the seatbelt sign is off, and Deb came back and she said to me, tell me what happened. And I told her what I just told you. And she said, oh, that's what that was about. And I said, oh, what was what about? And she said, well, because everybody comes through first class, she said this officer got on the plane with a gentleman in a suit and this woman, ticket lady, and they got on the plane and they went headed straight back to coach, and they knew who they were looking for, and they stopped at this gentleman and said something to him, and all of a sudden he's getting his luggage out, his overhead luggage out, and they went through it and found what they were looking for and got off the plane.
Wow.
And the two of us I sat there, she's standing there, and we just said, surveillance. Surveillance. They had, when I was sitting there, go sit down, they evidently went through surveillance tapes and saw what happened. And I, who think that when a flea lands on me, I have body consciousness, no, I never knew when that was taken out of my pocket, and I can't believe it's to this day. But anyway, but I tell this story, and I can't believe you provoked it unwittingly, but I tell this story because to me it's emblematic of how people change when you meet them where they are. When I was the ugly American demanding the impossible, what can be done? And he said, Feel Kika, only God can help you. And I called on the name of God in his language at the opening of the Quran, his sacred book. Of course he was going to help me. Of course. Held the plane. I'll never get over it. I mean, I think it was a miracle, but it was a miracle of people relating. And, well,
I'm glad I found the manuscript. Yeah.
I can't believe this.
So, and
All because Kristen is in Egypt, going to Egypt, yes.
you set this off. You first showed up at Chautauqua in 1970.
Yeah.
Was there any history in either Jim's family or yours about Chautauqua, or did you just float in one day?
We moved from New Jersey to Erie, Pennsylvania because of the Vietnam War. Because Jim had a deferment from getting drafted by working at Leonard Laboratories, but when Nixon had the birthday lottery, and his birthday came up 356th, he'd been working in manufacturing, didn't like it, wanted to be in retail pharmacy. He had a New Jersey license and a New York license, and of course he called his best friend, who was our best man at our wedding, who had just gotten married in April to a girl from Erie, Pennsylvania, and had moved there. And Jim called that night our dear friend, Tim and Loretta Patton, and said, is there any opening in pharmacy? And within 2 months, we moved to Erie, Pennsylvania. We were there by July. That was in May. By July, we were in Erie, Pennsylvania. And after church on Sunday, we were having breakfast with Tim and Loretta, and we said, hey, they were all interning still in pharmacy, and nobody was working on Sunday. And Loretta said, well, when we said, what are we going to do today? Everybody has off. And Loretta said, well, all my life I've lived here, but Tim moved there because she had grown up there. And all my life I've lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, but I've never heard. But I've heard of this place called Chautauqua, but I've never been there, she said. And then ... she said, but I hear it's free on Sunday. And we said, free? We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together at that point. And free? Let's go. I don't know how we found the way to get there, because 17 wasn't open. And we just sort of wended our way, and you get there, of course, picture the approach. And you see the parkers, and the parkers are going like this, and you just follow the crowd into the lower 40, and then you follow the crowd out and through the gate, and they give you your little ticket, and we follow the crowd, through the east-west brick walk, and by the time we got to Bester Plaza, I turned to Jim and I said, "What is this place? What in the world?" We had no idea. We brought bathing suits because we knew it was on a lake, and we asked where we could go swimming. We encountered somebody in Bester Plaza, and we asked where we could go swimming, and they directed us down to Hines Beach, and there was a bathroom, and we changed, and we went swimming, and then we bought ice cream cones at the pavilion, and then we left, and it never stopped coming back. We were per diem, coming for lectures, concerts, plays, operas, you name it, for 19 years. 19 years.
So what caused you to, at some point, say to Jim, let's buy a place, let's invest?
Yeah.
Because I think you did it at the arcade. Was it the
We
arcade?
were at the arcade, right. And that happened, there were so many miracles in our lives. I'll make this one short, Jim, calm down. But we were per diem for 19 years, and but my father had passed, and we moved my mother to Erie, Pennsylvania from Philadelphia, suburbs of Philadelphia. And we tried for a number of years to rent a place at Chautauqua, but it was draconian. There was no concierge, there was no anything. And I met a few people, and we tried, but there were 6 of us. And to try to find a place for 6 people, we just never did. So in the summer of '88, my mother was dying of cancer, God bless her, and she said, "Are you going to try to get a place for us at Chautauqua this year?" And I said, "No, because we're going to do a buy show at Disney for our pharmacy. And the kids we're all going to go." And so she said, "Well, in that case, I'm going to go to Chautauqua." So my mother found it. I don't know how she did. She found a place at the Summer House Inn. And before we left to go to Florida, I took her, got her settled in. It was a week on health. We used to have just one topic for the week, like one-word topics, and health. But she learned about a living will and all that sort of thing. And anyway, she passed the following January, and the following July, I came up to hear George Gallup, Center for Religious Research, because my field is religion, and I needed to hear what George Gallup had to say, so I came up for the 10:45, bought a daily, went home. Next day, Children's Peace Festival sponsored by the Benedictines, Joan Chittister and all that. And so we worked all day at the festival. And at the end of the day, I said, "I'm tired, I'm going to go home." We live 10 minutes from the zoo, Erie Zoo, where it was. And as I sat down to pick up the daily that I had picked up the day before, I sat down, in our family room to read it. It was about 4:15. At 4:20, my eyes fell on this ad that was in the Daily. It was an historic renovation that had been, building, and they had condos for sale. Don't ask me what got me to the phone, but I just got up and I went to the phone and dialed the number, and I said to the lovely man who answered the phone, I said, "I'm interested in this historic renovation." And he said, now this is about 4:20 by now, for maybe 4:25. And he said, "Oh, I can meet with you at 5:30. And I said, "Okay, that'll be fine." We didn't have to be to Western Pennsylvania for a thing for our daughters till 7:30, and he wanted us to be there at 5:30. And so I said, "That'll be fine, thank you very much, just tell me where it is." And he told me to go in and park a Miller. And anyway, I got off the phone and I said to Jim, "Get in the car, we're going to Chautauqua to look at a condo." And he said to me, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I said, "Look, he's expecting us, we just have to go get in the car." And I don't know, at this point, I don't know what's motivating me. But anyway, we got there, and 17 wasn't open, and I don't, it was just how we got there. We were there by 5:30, and I parked on Miller Hill, and we walked over, and I said, "Oh, I always thought this was the president's cottage. What did I know? It's big, it's prepondering, and it's on Miller Park," and I thought that was the president's cottage. But we walked in. It was on the upper floor, 33, and we walked in, and it was like almost immediately, the two of us said, "Oh, darn, we like this." Well, here's the thing. My mother wasn't a wealthy woman. She had the proceeds from her house sold in Philadelphia, and there are 4 children. It was just a little bit of money left to each of her 4 children. But it happened to be just enough for the down payment on this condo. So as I walked out, and I never had my checkbook with me, but I had this. He said, "Well, just put a little bit of money down just to hold it," because we said, this is like, he had an event at 6 o'clock that he had to go to. And so this happened in a half hour, from 5:30 to 6. And I wrote the check, this little bit of money just to hold it. But as we walked out the door, I heard my mother say, "Do this to honor me." And I thought, whoa, whoa, yeah, okay. There's that money that she had left us. And, things like that happen all the time in my life.
So now you're in the arcade, and shortly thereafter, you buy a place in Peck.
Yeah, 3 years. Because this guy that kept saying, "Where are we going? What are we doing?" We no sooner got there. And I loved the arcade. I just loved it. We were on that upper level that, was just like a rooftop terrace. By the way, we had the porch too. The terrace, the upper terrace. When you look at the arcade, there's a crown molding that's iron. It's about this deep, but it comes to about here on me. And the rest of it was a beautiful terrace, rooftop terrace. Gorgeous. I mean, I loved it. And I love Miller Park. I love living in Simpson. I love that, you walk down Simpson, you look straight into the Athenaeum lobby. And it was just lovely. We had lovely neighbors. I was very happy. I never thought I'd have that. And this guy wanted a porch. He wanted a porch. So one day he had seen this advertisement in the Daily every day, all season. This was 92, because we bought the arcade in 89. 90 was our first season. This is our 3rd season. And he had seen this advertisement in the Daily for a house that was for sale, and he wanted to see it. And I did not want, when I say I don't want to do something, I really get pushed back. And I didn't want to talk about a house that I love. Where I was enough. Okay, but I said to him, "Fine, just to keep you happy, I will go see this house." And it's a great house. It is a great house, but it was no bigger than our condo. It was being built at the time. It wasn't finished, but I could tell. We could sleep 8 in our condo, and this house maybe wouldn't sleep 8. I don't know, but I said to him 2 things. First of all, it's not big enough. If I'm ever going to move, it's going to be for a grandparent house. It's going to be big enough to hold, grandchildren. And it's too new. I like the old Chautauqua, et cetera. And he said, but I said to him as we stood on that upper porch, when the owner who was selling the house had left to go downstairs, somebody called her away. And I pointed across the street and I said, "Now that's a house I could get interested in. I love that old Queen Anne Victorian. It's a small Queen Anne Victorian. It looks like it's big enough for a grandparent house." And but I know already that those houses never get advertised. They get scooped up before they're even advertised. So we're done. Bye-bye. Let's go. We went home. That was the end of July in 92. Down at the Women's Club the day before the last day of the season, Thursday, Marion Strandberg said to me, "Now, Maureen, I know you don't want a house, but your husband does. And I just got a listing that I haven't advertised yet, and you might want to look at it." And I'm rolling my eyes. I said, "Okay, Marion, where is it?" She said 29 Peck. And I said, "Okay." Number didn't mean anything to me. And I said, "Okay, fine, I'll tell Jim." So the next day was a Friday. He happened to have off. He was there. I am, of course, going up to the 2 o'clock lecture, which I would never miss because it's my field and I'm there every day. And I said to him, "I'm going up to the 2 o'clock lecture. Do you want to come?" Marion said there's a house up there that you might want to look at. And anyway, as we walked down the brick walk and we went just around the corner on Peck, and we looked at numbers, and I saw where 29 Peck was. I almost fainted. because I said, oh my God, that's the house I
No
wish
kidding.
for.
Wow.
That's the house I wish for. And we walked through, and I knew we were going to buy it. I didn't know how, but I knew we were going to buy it. And when I walked out the door, all the trees that are there now were not there. As I walked out the front door to leave, I looked to the right, and the shingle I saw was the summer house inn where my mother had stayed. And I just said, Mother, how did you do this? How'd you do this? I got lots of stories. We got lots of stories.
In 1995, you became the first female chair of the Chautauqua Fund for the following year. That meant you were involved in Chautauqua. So aside from owning Arcade Peck, somehow, some way, you dove in to the community.
Oh, yeah.
Was that
I
an
felt-
easy thing to do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I just felt so at home. And the first year we were there in 90, I went up to the development office and said, I want to make a contribution. And I'd like to be
That
a volunteer.
ingratiates you to most people, yeah.
And I'd like to be a volunteer. Why not?
Yeah.
It's a good way to get to know people.
With the check, yeah.
Yeah. How do you do? Yeah.
And so now you're there. And they grab you as a volunteer. Are you one of those people during the prior annual funds? You make the phone calls and meet people and do that. And
Yeah. All that. In
yeah.
fact, when I was chair from 96 through 2002 through the Renew campaign. So in that time, I said, you know what, we need volunteers. And we had teams with captains, with volunteers, and the captains would meet with their teams in their home. I mean, it was more. I wanted people to be more involved, meeting, with each other, and then going out and meeting other Chautauquans. So it was very fun.
So 96 to 2002? Wow. I thought that you obviously were very successful. They kept on keeping you on.
They didn't get rid of me.
And then from there, well, what was the challenge during that time period? I mean, there was some special funding going on at that point.
Oh, gosh, you know what I remember the most, and we weren't successful. One of the things we really wanted to raise money to do was for staff and faculty housing. Because any place where, we used to run on college kids who would come and stay, and they were so decrepit, horrible, run down, and the prices were going up for finding places for symphony members and all the faculty for the arts, etc. We needed faculty and staff housing, and guess what? We still do. But it wasn't sexy, and we couldn't get any major funding. So we sort of jettisoned it for a long time.
So that time period of chairmanship of the volunteer annual fund, did you con Jim into doing this also?
Of course.
Even though he had a large deferment number.
He did. Well, yeah, to a degree. And she shakes his head over there, but to a degree.
But no, well, both of you were the faces, but you were the principal face of it all. And then you got onto the board, and that got now in the form of governance. And at the time, Dan Bratton was president, and who was the chair?
Bill Carslake.
President. And you were on there for, what, 10 years?
8.
8 years?
It's 4 and 4. 4 terms. 8.
And during that time, what were some of the highlights?
Oh, well, part of it for me, and you have to understand, at that time in our history, the board always made sure that there was representative of the 4 pillars. So I was really invited because my field was religion, and I was already involved in religion because I lived next door to the Hall of Missions. How prophetic is all of it? I forgot to mention, that first day when we walked into the house, when Marion took us, and she pointed through the back of the house and she said, that's the Hall of Missions, and boom, I knew I was going to work for the Department of Religion. Everything just evolves, everything just evolves. So, anyway, it was in that time frame that we started the Abrahamic initiative. But I give all credit to Reverend Dr. Ross Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What drove the Abrahamic initiative? Now, that was novel, not immediately received and welcomed, because it was novel.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the politics of that?
Mhm. It started with the Middle East Task Force in '95. And Dan Bratton very much wanted to replicate the success of the Chautauqua-Soviet exchange, which is what he had inaugurated and been part of at the beginning of his tenure. And it was so successful, and I used to say when I would introduce Juma on Friday and would give a little history about why we were doing it, I would always say, the Chautauqua-Soviet exchange was so successful that eventually Chautauqua took credit for perestroika and glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and why not? Why not?
Yeah.
So in '95, Dan Bratton organized the Middle East Task Force, and he asked me to be on it. I think because Ross suggested it, and it was quite a task force because we had representative from Hebrew University in Israel. The former ambassador to Jordan was on the committee. Bob Pelletreau, former ambassador to the Middle East, was on the committee. Of course, Dan Bratton, yeah. But Ross Mackenzie was on. And Ross knew some Muslims from his time in Gainesville. And so they were the Ismailis, and he invited the Ismailis to be on the committee. And we worked from '95 through '97. And in the spring of '97, Dan Bratton called the committee together and said, we're going to have to discontinue our planning. We were intending to take 75 Chautauquans to the Middle East. It would be to Jordan, not to Israel. But the travel team with which we were working said at that point that they were declining to work with us because it was getting too dangerous to take a group as large as 75 to the Middle East for all that was going on at that time. And so it was at that table that day, and it was very deflating, very sad because Dan wanted to do that citizen-to-citizen diplomacy that had been so successful with Soviets. He wanted to do that in the Middle East, which was the next spot that needed that kind of attention. And anyway, at the table, I'm sitting next to Dan, and Ross was straight across from me. It was in the Wendt boardroom, and I said to the table, Dan in particular, I said, Dan, why don't we, instead of, since you're now telling us we can't do the citizen-to-citizen diplomacy there, why don't we do that here? And why don't we teach about the relationship of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam here? Because we have such cachet in the world of religion here. So let's do it here. And Ross was sitting there, and I see Ross going like this, and that was spring of '97, and by '98 we had the first opening of the initiative, which of course then 2 years later, Reverend Dr. Jo Brown Campbell came, and she took it over and ran with it. And so no sooner did we do that than 2001 happened, 9/11, and boom, Islam became something we had to really work at. But we had already planned in 2001 to have Conrad Armstrong there in 2002. because she became, in many ways, an apologist for Islam, and Islam needed that help. So she was going to be there the entire season, and every Friday, which was appropriate in the Muslim world, to do a program on Islam, a thread through the season.
It has had its moments. I mean, and between you and Joan and others, where not completely understood, and it certainly as tensions have ebbed and flowed in the Middle East. How have you navigated that?
Well, we navigated it, I think, persistently by inviting a Muslim presence and inviting the scholars and inviting imams when we could. But for me, when Chautauqua had its first international conference in London in November of 2005, and Ibu Patel came. And this was over at the Ismaili Center in London, and it's our first international interfaith conference. And Ibu Patel came, and I loved everything he was saying and sharing with us, but what I heard him say was, people, if you really want to teach about the relationship of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you need to teach the young people. You really need to get to the young people. And I sat there and went, boom. We had a very ineffective Christian ministry at that point, and I said, that's what we're going to do next summer. That would be summer of 2006, so that was the first year of the Abrahamic program for young adults, and inviting a young presence of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, team of 4, that went all the way through 2019.
We skipped a part of your life here. At some point, you had an aha moment where you explained to Jim that, yes, I've been a volunteer, I'm inclined and passionate about the religion program, but now I'd like to be a little more educated. We had Kristen McMahon kind of go through a litany of things, which ultimately gets you to Harvard and stuff like that, but that just doesn't happen overnight, did it?
Kinda. Things like that happen. Things happen quickly with us. Although things fall into place to make it happen. We had an apothecary in Erie, 2 apothecaries in Erie. We sold one in '96, and the other we sold in '98. And in January of which freed Jim up, because then he just floated for CBS after that for a little bit. But in January of '99, I was sitting at the computer one day, and God bless my daughter Nikki, who made me learn how to use a computer when she was working at the Athenaeum, and I was typing up I was the secretary for the Women's Club for years, and so I was typing out my minutes on my little electric typewriter. And the summer she worked at the A before she got married, and she was there all summer, and she said, "Mother, you are not using that typewriter this year. You are going to you were going to learn how to use the computer." And I said, "No, don't make me. I really don't want to. I really don't care. I don't want to. No." But she made me. And all that summer, every time I called the desk at the Athenaeum and said, "Hi, is Nikki free for a minute?" And I'd hear somebody say, "Nick, your mom's working on the computer again." Well, anyway, come January, now that was '97. Thank God she did, because January, I'm sitting at the computer. Don't ask me what I was doing. I have no idea. But my daughter Carrie, when I had offhandedly said, I need to go back to school. I had done some graduate work in education and went, nah. I'd done some graduate work. I thought I was going to go for an MBA, and I did all the math courses and did well, and then I said, nah. And I knew I really wanted to go to divinity school. The only one I wanted to go to was Harvard Divinity School, so I mentioned it, and Carrie had bookmarked it. So this day, it was about mid-January, and I don't know, just all of a sudden this bookmark came into my head, and I thought I better go see what it looks like, so I did, and then I picked up the phone and I called Harvard, and I said, I would like to come next year. And they said, well, the deadline for next year is February 1st. And this is like January 16th. And I said, would you please overnight that to me? And the application, because you didn't do any applying online at that point. No. So they did. But by the time the application came, I had my references lined up. But the best part was when Jim came home that day, and what have you been doing? I said, well, I called Harvard. And I asked him to send, I called Harvard Divinity School, and I asked him to send an application. So what do you think? He said, if you get in, we'll go. If you get in, we'll go. I said, okay. I mean, that was it. So, yeah, I came, and then I overnighted everything, I think on January 30th or something like that. And on St. Patrick's Day, I was still subbing at the school I used to teach at, where I had retired in 97, but I kept going back and subbing. And on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, I came home, and I just went in, past the canvas on our porch, and I see this giant whiteboard saying, congratulations, Harvard grad student. And I just started running up and down the street.
You had clothes on, right?
I did. I did. But I mean, it's just like, and the funny thing is, I was trustee at the time because that was 99. And I foolishly told people that I had applied to Harvard Divinity School, and they looked at me with great empathy, and they said, do you have a safety school? Nope.
So this guy named Jim Rovegno is the guy that just simply pauses and said, if you get in, we'll go. Is he this? Did he also have a placard out that said Maureen Rovegno? Is that how you met him? Same thing?
You really want to know how I met him?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was a senior.
There was a segue, I think.
I was a senior in high school, and I had Sister Francis of the Blessed Sacrament. This is Notre Dame Catholic Girls High School, and I was co-editor of the yearbook. And Sister
Located where?
In Moylan, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Delaware County. And Sister Francis of the Blessed Sacrament said to me one day, if you apply to Duquesne University with your SAT scores and your grades, you'll get a full 4-year scholarship. And I said, okay. So she gave me the application, and we sent it in, and so I did. I got a full 4-year scholarship. Now, in those days, you didn't shop for a college, not in my economic bracket. And so that was March 25th that I got the letter. And so Easter was shortly thereafter, and on Easter break, what I thought in a Catholic school, Duquesne would probably send their students home for Easter. 2 girls from my high school had gone to Duquesne the year before, so I called them each separately, and I said, hey, guess what? I got a scholarship. I'm going to come next year. What's it like? And each of them separately said, oh, it's great. You're going to love it. We're having a great time. And I thought they were going to talk about academics, not a word of it. They were talking about the group they hung around with. And each of them separately, these 2, said to me, and there's this red-headed Italian you need to meet. And I went, really? I don't even, are there red-headed Italians? I didn't know any. And anyway, I said, okay, whatever. All right, fast forward to September. I'm in my dorm. Freshman dorm. My parents left me, and I'm by myself, and one of those 2 girls had moved up to the upper class dorm. She came looking for me, and she said, come on, the dining hall is closed today. Let's go downtown Pittsburgh, and we'll get something to eat. And I said, well, that's great. I would have starved that night. So we went down, came back, we were hanging out in front of her dorm, and this Bonneville convertible pulls up with these BMOC on campus, and she says to me, oh, there's that red-headed Italian I was telling you about last April. And there, he was in the back seat. He wasn't driving. It wasn't his car. Yeah. But
Just doing one of these things.
yeah, no, one of these. The top was down. And hello, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Well, every corner I turned for orientation week, the reason he was there is because his sister was coming as a freshman. He was a sophomore. And his mother was making one trip from New Jersey, so they both got left off, and he was kind of free for the week when freshmen were going through orientation. But every corner I went around, there was this guy, saying something very profound, like, "There goes Philadelphia." And
And you bought this.
the rest is history. Yeah.
All right, so we have an Italian guy and an O'Connor. So we got Italian,
Yeah.
we got Irish. This is
Yep.
perfect. Hence the black and the green here tonight.
That's right.
Perfect.
Well, it's the green anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I there's so much. I mean, there's just so much. But your paths have crossed with so many personalities that normally I would have baseball cards or something to trick your memory.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just throw some names and you can give us some reaction. Joan Chittister.
Oh. Joan is my dear heart. Bill Carslake put me on the search committee to find Dr. Ross McKenzie's also my dear heart, to find his replacement. So I was on the search committee, and Joan was the one we chose.
Joan Chittister.
Oh, you said Joan Chittister.
Yeah, I could say
Oh.
Joan Brown Campbell. We can
Okay.
flip. I deal with this with my wife all the time, so it's okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, when I heard Joan, I just stopped, because Joan Brown Campbell. So,
You choose. Which one would you like to talk about?
well, I'll talk about both of them, because equally, they're different but equal. Anyway, I was on the committee that chose Joan, and then Bill made me chair of the team to acclimate her, Joan Brown Campbell, and so we became very, very close right from the very beginning. I really helped her to acclimate, and we're still close. All right, so that's Joan Brown Campbell. Joan Chittister, I had known for years because of
Erie,
Pennsylvania. Yeah, and Joan also was the chair of the Global Peace Initiative for Women, and so between Joan Brown Campbell and Joan Chittister, of course, I'm going to be very involved with the Global Peace Initiative for Women. And Joan Brown, I knew Joan Brown Campbell, I knew Joan Chittister because she had been invited in the mid-'80s to come and talk, speak at the 2 o'clock for a whole week. And of course, I wasn't there every day because I was coming up from Erie, but I was there a lot, coming up with friends. And just have always just so appreciated her courage, her wisdom. She's brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. But her courage in standing up to the powers that be within the Erie Diocese, not to mention the rest of the country,
Yeah.
not to mention the Vatican. What's not to love?
Yeah. Ross McKenzie.
Oh, Ross McKenzie. First of all, he and Flora became very, very dear neighbors and friends. But he also pulled me into the Department of Religion very, very quickly. And I think by '93, I was facilitating the afternoon seminars in the Hall of Missions. We used to do that then. But I was very, 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 I still feel very close to him, call him all the time, as much as I can.
Chautauqua you've been at the Department of Religion, you were at the Department of Religion for what, 18, 19 years?
18.
I mean, you were the rock
An
throughout.
employee.
Yeah.
I volunteered for 12
But
before.
So, 30 years, and
30
essentially you
years.
were part of that action, and that constant rock, programming, you were working, and the leadership during that time period with Joan Brown Campbell and her prior job in the World Council.
She was General Secretary of the World Council of Churches. You have to
Yeah.
say it all together.
And that was a pretty active and had a lot of publicity with that. And then thereafter with after she, then Jean Robinson?
No, Robert Franklin.
Robert Franklin, of course. That was Robert Franklin from Atlanta. And then Gene from that. And Gene, of course, being the first gay
Bishop.
bishop, and so all of that has been sort of on the cutting edge, all three of them in their backgrounds.
Celebrities, all three.
Yeah.
Celebrities.
Yeah, and so, but with that comes not only celebrity, but also comes, people who might have concerns about their pedigrees. And have you had to navigate any of that stuff there?
I love them all so dearly.
No, not about them personally, but, the staff, Chautauquans, that's because they're the complete whole spectrum of people who have very conservative, very.
Yeah. Oh, all right, now I see what you mean. Yes and no. There was always some of that, but never egregiously so. Nothing that fazed me anyway, that's for sure. But I found each of them just very delightful to work with. And what I loved was because they had so much going on at their level in their capacities, which was national, they all had national standings but that left the department for me to run, which I loved. And they let me run it.
Yeah.
Now, I had a lot of autonomy and a lot of ideas about what needed to be done, and they were happy to have me do it. It doesn't get any better than that.
Your job entailed much, and programming was part of that. And how did it work? I mean, I was always curious about the Sunday selections, and then, of course, the Sunday selection was the week selection, the identification of who the speakers were, and how to convince some of them to spend their week here, not just simply come in, make a Sunday parachute and speak and go.
As far as the Sunday chaplains were concerned, right from the beginning, we really were in the vanguard for creating diversity. We wanted diversity. We wanted racial diversity. We wanted gender diversity. We wanted denominational diversity. But we really wanted excellence in all those categories. And I think for the most part, we did. We got that. There's so many. Otis Moss, the third, OM3, just fabulous. Oh my gosh, so many. And as far as, but doing the research, having the radar always on to try and discern who Chautauquans needed to hear and would want to hear as well. And there was just so many.
Well, I would think that everybody's blowing in your ear saying, Maureen, I just attended a sermon and I listened to so-and-so. He's the best. You need to get him here. They should be at Chautauqua. I mean, you only have 9 weeks.
Yeah.
And to be able to go through that vetting process, talk about that.
Well, especially with so many Chautauquans who love their pastors.
Right.
And I had to very gently say for the most part, because sometimes there would be real surprises that were wonderful. But for the most part, I would have to ultimately say, just what you just said, we only have 9 weeks, and it's a whole country to pull from, and sometimes from England as well, quite a few over the years. And we really have to take people that already have a lot of cachet in their own way and in their own time and merit. People mostly with national standing of some degree. And when you explain it gently to people who love their pastors, they go, well, yeah, okay. But keep in mind, if you ever need a substitute, and I'd say, yep, I got a list.
So if you had to pick, and this is, you've probably never been asked this question, an all-star in 9 weeks, you've had 30 years of that, and I know Otis Moss III would be one of them. You got 8 more to go.
Well,
What would you pick?
okay, Father Greg Boyle is a perennial favorite here, for all kinds of reasons. Oh, Craig Barnes, of course. Yeah, thank you. I don't know. I knew you were going to ask me. I made a list.
You didn't. Did you really? I haven't even noticed this. Oh, my God.
Because I
This was for the camera. This was not a setup.
I know.
Oh, my
Now,
gosh.
but this is a mixed list of, just as I sat yesterday or whenever it was, just anticipating you're going to ask me something like this.
Wow.
But here's what I want to say to you. 45 speakers, right? 45 speakers per year, 9 chaplains, that's 54, times 18. Guess what the number is? 972.
Yeah.
972. And I went, whoa. Okay, now, some of them were repeats. The better ones, we would have back. And when I give you, I'll say this list, and this was just random, so they're kind of mixed up. But it still was way more than 900. And I have quite a Rolodex. Really amazing. So, okay, this is in no particular order. Just stream of consciousness, Bill Moyers.
Yeah.
Bill Moyers, I love that man. Absolutely love him. Jim knows it's okay. But he was here a number of times, and it became such a part of the community while he was here. If he was only going to speak for a day, he'd still come the week ahead with his wife, and they really made themselves. But he was just so sterling. Barbara Brown Taylor, BBT. She's just somebody who's just near and dear to my heart. She's been here so many times, and of course, Sister Joan Chittister. Someone who only was here twice, but still is high on my list, and that was Houston Smith, because he's the first one in this country who really put the world's religions out there in a way that people could understand and relate to, and I just love the man. My students used to say, "Oh, Mrs. Rovegno, stop acting like he's a rock star." And I said, "But he is a rock star." One of my students, when she had gone to a lecture, got his autograph and mailed it to me. I mean, it's just, and I went, guess what? When he was here, he was so dear, but he was so deaf. I remember they invited me to a dinner to sit next to him, but it was like we were 100 miles apart because he was so hard of hearing. And I remember in '96 when he was here, Dan Bratton was introducing him in the morning, and Dan was standing next to him and just shouting into his ear. I mean, so close. And Dan would give these very profound questions, and Houston Smith would give these one-word answers, and the place would go wild. I love the man. Father Greg Boyle, Karen Armstrong.
Huh?
She's the only one we ever had for 14 straight seasons.
Wow.
14 years. But people wanted her, and they kept asking for her to come back. Rabbi David Saperstein, of course, Rabbi Sam Stahl has just been a backbone here at Chautauqua. Jack Spong, John Shelby Spong. People loved him or hated him, but they wouldn't miss a lecture. And he came every other year for about 8 times. And people, as I say, people loved to hate him, but they wouldn't miss a lecture. Otis Moss III, Raphael Warnock, now Senator Warnock, was just wonderful. Marcus Borg, John Dominic Crossan, classics, absolute classics in terms of theology. And then there was Andrew Young.
Sure.
You knew who to ask me to sit with. Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel. And Brian Stevenson. I mean, these people, we were so just blessed to have them here. And Jamie Raskin, wouldn't we love him to be president? Jamie Raskin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there are more, but I could go on all day. I'll
Anything
put it
else
back.
you're sitting here?
No.
You caught me by surprise there. You also served on for various presidents. Dan Bratton. Can you give us a?
Love Dan Bratton. Love Dan Bratton. He was, he was a former college president and ordained Methodist minister, and I think he really loved the community and knew exactly what to do when things needed to be done. He just did them.
Then we had McVeigh, short period of time.
Short
And then
period of
Tom
time.
Becker.
Tom Becker. Tom, of course, who could love Chautauqua more than Tom Becker?
And now Michael Hill.
And Michael Hill. Michael Hill, we've known since he was in college because he and my son were dear friends in college. And Brian, our son, said to Michael, because they were working together in the arts, they put theater on the map at St. Bonaventure together. And Brian said, Michael, you would love Chautauqua. So he brought Michael here, and then they were both in the John Doley School of Journalism, and Brian said, Michael, you need to work for the Daily. And Michael came and worked for the Daily. And Michael fell in love with Chautauqua. And he graduated and got a master's in fine arts. How perfect is that?
And now he's here because of you.
He's here because of Brian.
And Brian's here because of you.
And Brian's here because of us. And
Yeah.
we love Michael. We love Michael. And Peter. We love Peter and Michael. So I've loved all those gentlemen. They've all done such wonderful things for Chautauqua.
Having been 30 years at the Department of Religion, 30 years of programming, the chaplaincy, the week-long, morning sermons, the 2 o'clock lectures, has there been a guest or two that either is surprised or a unique and or funny incident where you'd say, I didn't see that coming? Because you control them. When they come onto the grounds, sometimes they can't get on the grounds. I know there was a time or two where they just couldn't get out of the country where they were at. But
Yeah. I could tell stories, but I won't. There are some that are just, surprising, but they're the ones you really can't tell for all kinds of reasons.
But you can tell about Clara Esther.
Oh, Clara Esther.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clara.
Because I'm part of this. It's just for personal reasons.
Clara, yeah. So that was the week it was the week on Martin Luther King. And I had invited Ruby Sales, who had connections to Martin Luther King. But on Monday, she called and said she couldn't come because her blood pressure was sky high off the charts. And so she was to speak on Wednesday. And, or was it Tuesday? I forget. Monday. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. Doesn't matter because this is Monday. And I said to Jean, we have a problem because we have a gaping hole. And then he and Michael put their heads together and started talking about what we should do. And I remembered that the deaconess, Fenton Joe from the deaconess house, had said to me at the beginning of the season in June, Maureen, we have a deaconess who knew Martin Luther King. And is there any way she can come? Well, we had a full roster at that point, so I said, no, but thank you for telling me that, and tucked it away. So I immediately called Joe on Monday morning and said, remember you told me that you have a deaconess who knew Martin Luther King? And she said, yep. I said, may I have her phone number? She said, yep. So I called out of the blue. I called Clara, and she said to me later, she said, I almost didn't pick up the phone because I don't answer calls when I don't know the number. But she picked up the phone, and I said to her, Clara, I need you. Ruby Sales was going to do a lecture here at Chautauqua Institution. She can't, and I think you would be perfect. And I wasn't even sure why. I knew she knew Martin Luther King. I mean, as it turned out, she really had an experience with Martin Luther King that was beyond the beyond. And she just paused, and she said, well, I have to go to New York next weekend. I said, I can get you there. Just, you know, if you can get to Chautauqua by tomorrow, I can get you afterwards to New York for this event that she needed to go to. And she said, okay. By the way, where are you? I said to her. She said, Mobile, Alabama. And I said, I can get you. And she said, okay. And then she said to me, I'm going to call the airlines and change my reservation. And I said, okay, but I'm going to give you a number that you should call our travel team, and they will get you from where you need to go to get to Chautauqua, and then when you get to New York, and it worked out. It was just, that was a miracle. That was a miracle. But if Joe hadn't said something, and if I hadn't thought about it and remembered, of course, there's about a zillion stories like that.
Well, for the camera, let me just conclude the Clara Esther story, because I listened to part of that at the 2 o'clock, and I said, oh my gosh, I, for one, need to interview her. And I know she wanted to be interviewed by me. I'm sure that was just the case. That's why she came. So her quick story is she was active in the movement. She happened to be in Memphis as a leader of, like at 18 years old, of the student group. And they were to meet at the hotel with Andrew Young so that they could all go out to dinner and celebrate their work on it. It was a union, workers. It was a worker strike thing.
That's right.
Work action thing. And she was there waiting outside when Martin Luther King came out on the balcony and was kind of waving and got shot. So she's there listening to the shots. She then runs upstairs and, as a sort of a 18-year-old concern, grabs towels and physically is with him in his dying day. And so she explains that in great detail, and your jaw hits the ground.
True.
Because that part of the story you just don't hear. You know, the actual part of that. So it was a moment in time for me, which came as a result of a lot of serendipity and our relationship, where you had a sense of humor to let me sit at the Hall of Missions to interview her.
Many times.
Many times, yes. So,
But one more thing with Clara. She actually loosened his belt so he could breathe better. Yeah.
Well, it even gets better and crazier, because she, in her role as a good Christian, actually engaged with James Earl Ray later on in kind of mission-type conversations. So, wow, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
We could go on for hours on end, but you chose at some point to retire. And you chose February 14th, 2023 to do so. Why?
Well, that was my start date. I actually started, that was my employment anniversary. I always loved that I had started on February 14th, Valentine's Day, right? And, you know, if you're ever looking for reasons or reading the signs, etc., I thought to myself, Valentine's Day, but that would be 18 years. And in the Jewish tradition of gematria is the mystical Judaism tradition of assigning numbers to every letter a number to every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And so when those letters then, with their numerical equivalencies, are added up, that number becomes symbolic for that particular whatever it is describing in that way. So in Hebrew, chai, as in lachaim, is to life, and chai is life. And so the number for chai is 18.
Oh. I didn't know that.
And I thought, an 18-year labor of love. But I love everything that symbolizes chai. And so if you give a Jewish person a monetary gift, it should be $18 or multiples thereof. And if you only give them $18, that's enough because you're giving them the gift of life. But if you give them something else, you want to give them $18 in addition. But I always think about the number 666, which is, in Revelation, the book of Revelation. And it's taken to be representative of the devil, right? But it's actually Nero Augustus Caesar, because that all adds up to 666. And so in the book of Revelation, when that number is mentioned, it's not referring to the devil per se, but to them, Nero was the epitome of evil. But when I graduated from Harvard, and I had to get a graduation car, because I had given my car to Brian before I went to Harvard, because you can't have two cars in Cambridge. You don't even want one car in Cambridge because there's no place to park it. But when I got my graduation car, the license plate that came with the car was 666 dash and 3 letters. And I said, I don't think that's going to work for me. So anyway, I thought, oh, no, now I have to get a vanity plate. Oh, dear. And I hate vanity plates per se. Some of them are funny and everything, but I thought, what can I do that's going to be meaningful? So I'd done so much work in restorative justice when I was at Harvard for 4 years in forgiveness and reconciliation, that I decided that the thought number 4, LIV, number 4 LIV, number 2 GIV. It's number 4 GIV, number 2 LIV, forgive to live. I thought, okay, I think I can live with that, and it'll force me to try to live up to it, which I think the world needs.
And I think you have.
I'd like to keep trying.
Yeah. I know you know that I was asked the question, what's the question? Is you're rolling in, obviously you made cards here tonight in anticipation of questions, but was there kind of one that you thought, Greg's going to come at me and I better be prepared, that I haven't even thought?
Mm-hmm. You wouldn't ask me this, but the question would be, Maureen, why do you like working with the Turner Winter Series so much? And the answer would be, first of all, it's fun. Secondly, I've learned so much about the region over the years, and also people at Chautauqua. The people whom you choose to sit in this chair, and at Chautauqua for all those years too, are just so interesting, and I have a greater appreciation of where we live and with whom we live than I otherwise would have had if I hadn't been part of this series for 19 years.
And certainly the capstone of 19 years is you, because we wouldn't have known that much about you, certainly, and you're...
More than you needed to know.
Yeah. Well, no, really. How many guys will walk around now with Maureen Rovegno and hope for the best, Let me just conclude with this. This comes from, after they had a big party for you at Chautauqua, and you concluded by saying, let's all keep celebrating and loving and treasuring the gift that has been given to each one of us. I love my time serving Chautauqua. I love all of you dearly, and I love Chautauqua. May all that is mighty and holy continue to bless Chautauqua and all of us always. Amen. Thank you, Maureen Rovegno.
Amen. And thank you, Greg Peterson.
And for the camera, this is the longest interview we have ever done in Turner because of Maureen Rovegno's ability to keep our attention. So that's a real
I'm going to
compliment.
get yelled at by Jim. He tells me my stories are too long.
No, it really was wonderful. Thank you. Are we off before we can check? Okay. It's this is that time of seeing folks, for those who've done this for 18 years.